The class was told to build a ranged weapon. The Earth girl made a slingshot in 13 seconds and took down the instructor's patrol bot. The scoring system flagged it as an anomaly. The target was down. Thexol looked at the readout, then at the girl, then back at the readout. His secondary eyelids, involuntary, Pelari reflex, designed for bright impacts, did something they had never done during an intake session before. They flickered. He filed the flag under equipment variants and moved on. This was a mistake. He would spend considerable time, later, thinking about that specific decision. The intake bay at Thaix Combat Institute smelled of ozone and warm polymer, which was the smell of 47 species worth of energy weapons being registered before lunch. Thexol was Pelari, which meant he had secondary eyelids and an instinct for accurate paperwork, and he had used both without incident for 12 years running Evaluation Chamber 7's intake protocol. 47 species, 1 intake form per cadet. Equipment manifest, digital clearance, signature registration done. He was mid-entry on his log when the morning's last transfer cadet walked in. She was not what the room expected. The room had a Surin cadet at the far counter, whose Neuralink threading sat silver behind his left ear, and whose targeting rig auto-populated half its own intake form the moment Thexol's sensor array registered its digital signature from across the space. There was a Thurvani pair with magnetic bow systems racked on their backs like folded wings. There were weapons on every surface, and every weapon glowed, hummed, or sat on a magnetic cradle designed for exactly its shape. The girl set 3 things on the intake counter: a wooden fork, roughly the length of her forearm, a loop of elastic polymer connecting its 2 tines, and a canvas pouch about the size of a closed fist with a faded yellow sun embroidered on one side. She did not explain, she did not look around the room, she waited. Thexol read her manifest: wooden frame, unregistered material, no digital output, elastic polymer band, tension device, no charge, no guidance, ferrous spheres times 40. He looked at the pouch. It was sitting there with the yellow sun facing up. He entered it under personal effects. She did not correct him. He processed her under the standard transfer cadet code and flagged her equipment file, 7N, educational prop, non-scoring. He did this efficiently. The rule existed for a reason. The form had a box for it. He moved on to his lunch notes and did not look at the pouch again. This was his second mistake. The blended CTA, narrator voice only. I'll tell you now, the chamber had never failed to contain a result. What it could not do was contain her. Stay close. 3 hours earlier, by the Thaix calendar, Proctor Sevran had reviewed the morning intake log from his office at the observation bay end of the corridor. He had 4 chambered eyes, each independently mobile, a Quilathi trait that made him one of the finest active ballistics assessors in the sphere before administrative rank consumed his schedule. He read the 7N flag on Nara Ward's file. He felt nothing, which was correct. The rule was clear. The outcome was predetermined. He went to the intake floor because procedure required direct delivery of any non-standard classification. He was not unkind about it. He was precise. Cadet, he said, I have logged your equipment under code 7N educational prop, non-scoring. You are welcome to demonstrate it during the practical session for contextual interest. It will not receive a performance grade. He noted professionally that she did not appear surprised. He attributed this to youth. He filed nothing about her expression because nothing about her expression triggered a relevant form. She looked at him for a moment. That's okay, she said. The targets will. Sevran interpreted this as a figure of speech. He returned to his office and did not think about it again until considerably later, when he would think about very little else. Thexol ran the pretrial briefing to the assembled cadets at 14:00. Standard format. 40 seats, 31 occupied after the morning's transfers. He delivered the Protocol 9 figures the same way he always did, in a flat assessor's voice that was meant to motivate and usually did. Evaluation Protocol 9's staircase conditions eliminated 62% of cadets, even with assisted targeting systems. The figure landed in the room the way a weight lands on a scale. Every cadet shifted. A few exchanged looks with their Neuralinks or targeting feeds, silently confirming uplinks. Nara Ward was checking the tension on her elastic band. She was doing this by drawing it back with 2 fingers, slowly and listening. Thexol noticed she was not watching him. He did not note this in the briefing log. It did not occur to him that listening to the elastic band's resistance was data collection. The canvas pouch was on the table beside her slingshot, 40 bearings inside it, silent. The yellow sun patch faced up. Thexol had already filed it. He did not look at it again during the briefing. Dramatic irony, the room knew the 62% figure and treated it as a warning. One person in the room did not treat it as a warning. She had been told, very recently, that her weapon would not receive a performance grade. She had agreed that the targets would anyway, and she was currently using the remaining briefing time to memorize the tension curve of a strip of elastic polymer she had probably stretched 40,000 times before today. Evaluation Chamber 7 opened at 14:30. The walls were pressure-sealed composite, the floor a gravity plating grid that Thexol could adjust from his assessor's station, and every surface that wasn't a target was a sensor. The AI scoring system required a digital weapon signature to register an impact event. This was not a gap in the system's design. It was a feature. The system was calibrated to measure what the Institute considered measurable. The Surin cadet, Neuralink silver at his temple, cleared standard scoring protocol in 30 seconds and took his position at the primary lane. The Thurvani pair registered their magnetic bows through the signature reader without removing them from their backs. 7 other cadets, 6 species, all cleared, all digital, all in the system. Nara Ward was handed a waiver form. It noted, in the polite bureaucratic language of institutions that have never needed to be impolite about this particular subject, that her weapon would not generate a performance score because it lacked a verified digital output signature, and that she acknowledged this prior to the practical session beginning. She read it, signed it, picked up the slingshot and the canvas pouch. Thexol logged the waiver, opened the staircase protocol, and activated the sensor suite. Standard opening, all instruments nominal, nothing in the chamber had ever needed to improvise. He initiated Rung 1. Standard stationary targets, normal gravity, full lighting, 5 targets at regulation distance, rated for standard kinetic impact, sensor equipped. The Surin cadet raised his targeting rig. The Neuralink interface synced in 0.4 seconds. He fired. The scoring system registered the impact, logged the signature, timestamped the event, and advanced his performance counter. Clean, efficient, the room worked. Nara Ward reached into the canvas pouch. Her fingers found a bearing the way a hand finds a familiar tool in a familiar pocket. She seated it in the elastic loop, drew back, and paused for exactly the length of a breath. 3 shots, 3 targets down. The scoring AI flagged all 3 impacts, unregistered external kinetic event. Source, unverified, no digital signature detected, recommend manual review. She tilted her head at the readout screen on the chamber wall. Do I need to miss one to get a reading? Thexol's secondary eyelids flickered. He stared at the anomaly flags, 3 of them, stacked, each one timestamped to a different target, each one noting the impact had registered on the physical sensor, but not in the scoring feed because no signature matched. The targets had clearly been struck. The scoring system simply did not know what had struck them. He looked at her. She was receipting a 4th bearing out of what appeared to be habit rather than need, then putting it back in the pouch. Not boasting, not waiting for a reaction, just tidying. Thexol opened a new assessor's note and typed, manual anomaly log, 3 impacts, rung 1, no signature source, physical target response confirmed, filing as equipment variance. He forwarded it to Sevran's queue. Sevran did not respond. The Surin cadet, on the lane beside her, missed his second shot when the target drifted 2 centimeters on its oscillation cycle. His targeting feed lagged on the recalibration. He recovered and hit the 3rd. It was a good performance. Thexol logged it under performance scoring, timestamped, clean in the system. He looked at the 3 anomaly flags. then at the cadet with the Neuralink, then at the girl who had not missed. Gravity dropped to half. Thexol watched it happen on the plating readout, the floor grid shifting to 0.5 G on his command, a standard mid-staircase adjustment that typically produced visible hesitation in unassisted shooters. Without a stable ground plane, the body's internal calibration for pull and release drifted. Sensor-linked systems compensated automatically. Unassisted humanoids generally did not. Nara Ward's draw arm dropped 3 centimeters. The bearings still landed. She had adjusted between shots by feel, not calculation. Thexol could see it in the way her elbow shifted, small and immediate, the way a person adjusts when the ground changes texture underfoot and their body corrects before their mind has registered the change. The target's impact sensor registered. The scoring AI flagged it again as an unregistered external kinetic event, which was becoming, Thexol thought, a category that was quietly outgrowing its own definition. "Oh," she said, to no one in particular, "lighter, that's actually easier." At the next lane, the Thurvani cadet's magnetic bow fired. It had auto-corrected for the gravity shift using its onboard compensator, calculated the new arc, and adjusted the launch angle by 4 degrees. The round went into the ceiling. The cadet stared at it. He reset the compensator and began the recalibration sequence, which would take 40 seconds. Thexol filed his second escalation note to Sevran. He phrased it carefully. Performance log, Rung 2, Subject Ward, continues to produce unregistered kinetic impacts on valid targets under modified gravity. Magnetic bow system in lane 4 produced ceiling impact during same conditions. Recommend review. He sent it and watched the Q indicator. Sevran's office showed as active. The response came back in 2 minutes. Log as equipment variance. Continue protocol. Thexol read this 3 times. He looked at the ceiling, where a small dent now marked the Thurvani round's impact point. He looked at the anomaly feed, which now had 5 entries. He looked at Nara Ward, who was standing at her mark, with the canvas pouch resting against her hip, waiting for the next rung with the patience of someone who has stood at many marks and waited for many things to begin. He advanced to rung 3. The crosswind injectors came on first. Thexol heard them cycle up from the wall manifolds, a low lateral hiss from both sides of the chamber, building to the kind of pressure that made loose equipment drift and target oscillation patterns become genuinely unpredictable. Then, the gravity plating spiked to 1.8 G, which made the floor feel like it was pressing up rather than pulling down. Then the targets switched to irregular evasive patterns, moving on randomized vectors instead of the fixed oscillation path of the lower rungs. Rung 3 eliminated 62% of cadets, even with assisted systems. Thexol knew this number well. He had read it to the room 2 hours ago. He believed it. In the back of his mind, somewhere below the part that was filing notes and running the sensor suite, a quieter process was beginning to form a question it did not yet have language for. Nara squinted once. It was a short, specific squint, not distress, not confusion, but the look of someone narrowing their focus onto something that exists at a precise distance. She lifted the bearing a fraction higher than she had on the lower rungs, then she put spin on it. Thexol's secondary eyelids shut for 1.4 seconds. He opened them. The target's rear sensor port had registered an impact. The bearing had curved mid-flight, not from guidance, not from any onboard system, not from the magnetic bias of the floor plating, from spin. She had put spin on a 5.6-gram metal sphere using her fingers and the elastic band, calculated the curve the crosswind would produce, and aimed for where the target would be when the bearing arrived there. No, he reread that. She had not calculated. Calculation implied a distinct cognitive step between observation and action. What she had done was faster and quieter than that. She had just done it. He was still processing this when her voice came through the intercom, conversational, almost idle. "Does the wind always come from the left here, or is that just this room?" The chamber's calibration drone, which had been sent in at the start of rung 3 to verify impact registration on the moving targets, flew directly into its own crosswind correction path. Its guidance system and the injector draft disagreed about which way level was. The drone's stabilizer fired, overcorrected, and it aborted its approach vector entirely, hovering at the chamber wall until the run was over. Thexol's secondary eyelids clamped shut again, 1.4 seconds. He forced them open. He typed his third escalation note. He was writing faster now, which was not like him. He added a notation he had not included in the previous two. Biomechanical performance exceeds expected parameters for unassisted humanoid musculature. The spin application on the projectile during crosswind plus 1.8 G conditions is not consistent with unassisted targeting. Recommend biomechanical review of subject prior to rung 4. He sent it. This time Sevran read it. Thexol watched the cue indicator, active, then reading, then a pause that was longer than a dismissal pause. He watched the observation window at the chamber's far end. The glass was one way. He could not see Sevran, but after a moment, a shape moved behind it, and he knew Sevran had walked to the window. He filed that as progress. He was not sure toward what. The Surin Cadet, Neuralink, 0.003-second response time, hold of Theix's standing unassisted targeting record, which had been blank before his cohort and was now a single entry in the system, had hit every target in rungs 1 and 2 without incident. In rung 3 he hit 3 of 4, which was well within acceptable parameters for Neuralink performance under crosswind plus gravity variance. He logged his results through the scoring system. Clean. Timestamped in the record. Thexol looked at the anomaly feed. 9 entries now, each one a hit that could not be logged because the system did not recognize the source. He thought about this, then he thought about it more carefully, which took a moment. The system was designed to log what it could verify. What it could not verify, it flagged. It had been flagging Nara Ward's shots as external anomalies since rung 1, which meant that from the scoring system's perspective, a series of targets had been struck by nothing in particular, repeatedly, under increasingly hostile conditions, without apparent explanation. He filed the 9th flag under manual anomaly log and moved to rung 4. Strobe lighting came on at 3-second intervals, randomized by 0.2 to 0.6 seconds. The noise injectors added a frequency wash across the auditory range that made verbal communication inside the chamber difficult and made concentration harder. All prior variables remained. Gravity at 1.8 G, crosswind injectors at full pressure, targets on evasive vectors. This setting, per Protocol 9, produced a 34% failure rate even in sensor-locked drones. The reason was simple. Strobe conditions scrambled visual processing at a rate that exceeded most automated compensation systems' refresh cycles. A drone that saw a target at position A in one flash found it at position B in the next, and the gap between flashes was just irregular enough to make prediction unreliable. An unassisted human eye in rung 4 conditions was in Thexol's professional assessment essentially non-functional as a targeting instrument. Sevran's top-ranked student was a Quilathi cadet named Arav Sol, no relation, different family branch, who had never failed a strobe trial in 4 semesters. His 4-chambered eyes were the reason. Quilathi visual processing was built for microprojectile tracking in flight. Each of the 4 chambers operated on a slightly offset refresh cycle, which gave a Quilathi cadet something close to continuous motion data even under strobe conditions. Arav Sol took his position at the primary lane. He had not spoken about Nara Ward during the session, but Thexol had watched him glance at her equipment twice during the rung 3 briefing. His expression had been the specific expression of a person who does not want to be seen looking. The strobes came on. Nara Ward blinked slowly, not a flinch, not a wince. She blinked the way a person blinks when they are waiting for something to settle into a rhythm. Then she found it. Thexol could see it in her stillness, the way she stopped tracking the targets entirely and simply stood with the bearing loaded and waited. She was not trying to see between the flashes. She was counting the intervals. She fired in the gaps. Every shot landed. She did not rush. She did not look at the scoring feed. She did not look at Arav Sol. On the 3rd strobe pulse, Arav Sol dropped his weapon. His 4-chambered eyes, the same trait that made him exceptional, that had carried him to the top of Sevran's ranking in 4 semesters, had overloaded on the randomized brightness intervals. Each chamber was tracking slightly different timing. The input was not continuous motion data. It was 4 conflicting motion datasets arriving simultaneously, and his visual system had tried to reconcile them instead of choosing one. The weapon hit the chamber floor, and his hands went to his face. He was not hurt, he was simply done. Thexol's secondary eyelids fired continuously for 6 seconds. He sat very still at his sensor station. A maintenance alert appeared in his peripheral display. Secondary eyelid activity, assessor station 7, possible medical event. Do you require assistance? A technician appeared at the station doorway. Thexol waved her off without turning around. He was watching Nara Ward reload a bearing with the unhurried motion of a person doing something she has done, at a rough estimate, an enormous number of times. In the chamber, Arevsol retrieved his weapon from the floor and stood with it. He did not look at anyone. Thexol logged his rung result under performance records. Then he opened the manual anomaly log and added 12 more entries for targets struck by no registered source. The anomaly log now had 21 entries. It covered 4 rungs. Every entry pointed at the same source the scoring system could not name. Thexol sat back in his chair. He thought about the pretrial briefing he had given 2 hours ago and the 62% elimination figure he had read to the room. He thought about what that number meant and what it had been meant to mean, and whether those 2 things were still the same. They were not, he decided. They were not the same at all. He was still composing his 4th escalation note, the one where he would have to explain, in professional language, that a transfer cadet had completed 4 rungs of a trial designed to eliminate the majority of cadet participants with assisted weapons, using a tool the system had logged as a non-scoring educational prop, and that every documented impact had been filed as an anomaly because the room had no category for them. When Nara Ward's voice came through the intercom from inside the chamber. She had been quiet since Rung 3's wind question. She had not addressed anyone during Rung 4. Now she spoke in the same tone she used for everything, which was the tone of someone reporting a minor observation about ambient conditions. I can keep going, she said, but I'm going to run out of targets before I run out of bearings. Do you want me to start again from the first row? Thexol looked at the target array. She was right. 16 targets, Protocol 9, standard configuration, all down. He had not noticed. He had been watching the anomaly log. He looked at the observation window. The shape behind it had not moved in 6 minutes. Sevran was still there. Thexol sent the 4th escalation note and added one line at the end that he had not included in the previous 3. I believe we may need to look at where she is from. He did not know yet why he had written that. He thought it might be important. He was correct. The 4th escalation note sent, Thexol turned back to the sensor suite and found that the problem had changed shape. Not the problem of Nara Ward specifically. That problem had been accumulating since Rung 1 and had by now taken on the particular mass of something that would require a structural solution rather than a procedural one. No, the problem that had just changed shape was smaller, more immediate, and entirely his own doing. His protocol list had run out. He sat with this for a moment. Evaluation Protocol 9 had 5 rungs. He had run 4. The 5th, Rung 5, final assessment, full simultaneous variables, had been struck from the current session after a board review 2 semesters ago had noted that simultaneous strobe plus crosswind plus gravity spike plus noise injection at maximum output was producing equipment failures faster than cadet failures, which skewed the performance data. The rung existed on paper. It had not been run in 7 months, which meant the staircase technically was over, which meant Nara Ward had technically completed the trial, which meant Thexol had to file a result. Right now, with the scoring system showing 21 anomaly flags and 0 registered impacts and a manual log that was beginning to resemble a separate investigation rather than a performance record. He opened the result submission field. He looked at it. He looked at the anomaly log. He looked at the field again. She had completed 4 rungs of a 5-rung trial that had been rated to eliminate the majority of participating cadets. Using a weapon the system did not recognize, producing impacts the system could not log, in conditions that had put his top-ranked observer in a chair with his hands over his face. And the field in front of him had a drop-down menu with 3 options: pass, fail, and incomplete administrative hold. He clicked administrative hold and filed it without a grade. Then he sat back and thought about the 4th escalation note, which had ended with a line he had not planned to write. "I believe we may need to look at where she is from." He had not heard back. He pulled up her transfer file. In the chamber, Nara Ward was doing nothing in particular. This was, Thexol had noticed, her default state between rungs, not restless, not performing patience, simply standing at her mark with the canvas pouch resting against her hip and the slingshot at her side, present in the way that people are present when they are not thinking about being watched. The chamber's ambient lighting had returned to normal after rung 4. The strobe array was dark. The noise injectors had cycled down. The crosswind had dropped to a baseline hiss. She turned her head slightly to the left, then to the right. She was, Thexol realized, still reading the room. The trial had stopped, and she was still reading the room. He watched her for a moment longer than he needed to. Then he went back to the transfer file. Her origin planet, Earth. Region of origin, New Sonora. He typed the region into the supplementary database out of habit and got a Climatand infrastructure brief that ran to 6 paragraphs. He read the first sentence. He read it again. He typed Earth's current global environmental classification into the query field and waited. The query ran for 4 seconds, which was longer than usual. He would find out why in approximately 40 minutes. For now, the screen returned a result he did not expect, which he read once, closed, and did not act on immediately because his sensor console had just flagged an event in Evaluation Chamber 7. Nara Ward had moved. She had not moved toward the exit, or toward the scoring terminal, or toward the observation window to ask whether the session was concluded. She had moved 3 steps to her left, where the chamber's main lighting grid had a slight shadow band running along the east wall, a minor calibration artifact that had been on the maintenance list for 2 semesters. She was standing in it. She tilted her head back and looked at the ceiling. He switched the chamber intercom on. "Cadet Ward, the rung sequence has concluded. You are free to." "What's above this room?" she said. He blinked. His secondary eyelids remained still, which was becoming unusual enough to note. "I'm sorry." "The floor above, what's up there?" He checked the building schematic out of reflex. Storage and maintenance, environmental systems, the crosswind manifolds route up through a Y. She was still looking at the ceiling, the shadows not from the lights, the grid's fine, a pause. "The floor above is running something, it's coming through the plating." She stepped out of the shadow band, just curious. She looked at the intercom panel on the wall as if she knew exactly which unit he was speaking through. "Am I done?" Thexol looked at the schematic. The maintenance team had been running a structural resonance check on the level above Chamber 7 for the past 6 days. He had walked past the work order 3 times this week. He had not connected it to the shadow band, which he had assumed was a lighting fault. He looked at the shadow band. He looked at the work order. He looked at the schematic. He said, "Yes, please stand by." He closed the intercom and sat very still for a moment. She had been in the room for 40 minutes. She had identified a structural resonance artifact in the floor plating that the maintenance team's own equipment had not flagged. She had identified it by standing in the right place and looking at a shadow. He thought about the 4th escalation note. He thought about the line he had not planned to write. He thought about the query that had taken 4 seconds. He opened the result field again. Administrative hold still showed. He added a note to the hold flag, pending classification review. Do not advance to grade submission until review complete. Then he sent a message to Sevron that read, "I need you to come to the assessor station." Not a flag, not an escalation note, a direct message. The kind you sent when protocol had run past the edge of the protocol list and you needed another person in the room. Sevron's reply came back in 40 seconds. I'm already on my way. Sevran arrived with his hands clasped behind his back and his four-chambered eyes in the loose, slowly rotating orientation that meant he was thinking rather than tracking. He stood beside Thexol's station and read the anomaly log. He read it in full, which took 3 minutes, because there were 21 entries and he read each one. He did not speak. Then he read Thexol's 4 escalation notes, in order, including the response times. He did not speak. Then he pulled up the scoring record for the session and looked at the column for Nara Ward's lane. The column was blank, except for the administrative hold flag. He said, "She's still in the chamber." "Yes, Proctor. You didn't release her. I asked her to stand by." "Why?" Thexol had a prepared answer for this, which was procedurally accurate and would have satisfied the question on paper. He had been composing it since he sent the direct message. He looked at the anomaly log, then he said something different. "Because the session isn't over." Sevran turned one of his 4 eyes toward him. The other 3 stayed on the screen. The rung sequence concluded after rung 4. Rung 5 is suspended from active protocol. "Yes, Proctor. So the session is, by definition, over." "The rung sequence is over," Thexol said. "I don't think the session is." The 3 eyes on the screen rotated to join the 4th. All 4 were on Thexol now, which was the Quilathi equivalent of full attention. It was slightly alarming. "Walk me through what you're telling me," Sevran said. Thexol walked him through it. He used the anomaly log as his reference. He described each rung in the same flat, sequential language he used for all assessor reports, except that the content was not flat. It was a record of a weapon. The room could not register hitting things the room was rated to protect. Under conditions, the room was rated to make that impossible, and the weapon was a wooden fork with an elastic band and a ferrous sphere, and the cadet holding it had previously been classified as carrying an educational prop. He got to rung 3, and the spin shot. Sevran said, "Stop." Thexol stopped. "She put spin on it." "Yes, Proctor." "Manually, in 1.8G crosswind." "Yes." Sevran was quiet. He looked at the chamber window. Through the one-way glass, Nara Ward was standing at her mark, still waiting, the canvas pouch at her hip, the slingshot at her side. She had been standing there for 11 minutes. She showed no particular sign of impatience or concern. She was looking at the east wall. "The shadow band," Thexol said. "What?" "She's identified the structural resonance artifact in the east wall lighting. She said it wasn't a lighting fault. She was correct. It's the maintenance work on the level above." Sevran stared at him. "She's been in there 40 minutes. 53 now." The 4 eyes rotated back to the screen, back to the window, back to the anomaly log. "What's on the environmental record for her origin region?" Sevran said. "I ran a query. It's still," Thexol checked. The query had returned. He had closed it without reading it properly because the sensor flag had fired. He opened it again. They both read it. It was not a long record. New Sonora, semi-arid high desert, elevation variable, grid infrastructure rated intermittent pre-2041, protein sourcing predominantly field-acquired, population dispersal low, nearest medical facility at standard response time of 4 hours and 30 minutes. Environmental stress index, significant. Cognitive and motor adaptation profile for long-term residents, not on file. And at the bottom, a flag he had not seen because he had closed the screen before it loaded. Parent classification. See Earth Global Environmental Status, updated 14 months ago. He ran the Earth query again. This time he let it finish. This time he read every word. He looked at Sevran. Sevran was reading it too. Neither of them said anything for a moment. In the chamber, Nara Ward had moved slightly. She had shifted her weight to her left foot and was now looking at the ceiling again, following something in the plating that she appeared to find mildly interesting. She looked entirely unconcerned. This was, Thexol thought, the most alarming thing about her. Sevran said, very quietly, what classification did her transfer paperwork list. Thexol already had the file open. He had opened it before Sevran arrived, which was why the line at the end of the fourth escalation note had come out the way it had. He read the field aloud. The silence that followed was the specific silence of a person who has just understood that a decision they made several hours ago was based on information that was not the information they thought it was. Sevran's 4 eyes were very still. "She's been in there 53 minutes, he said again. 54. And the rung sequence is technically concluded. Yes, but you don't believe the session is. No, Proctor, I don't. Sevran straightened. He looked at the chamber. He looked at the administrative hold flag. He looked at Nara Ward, who had just turned her attention from the ceiling to the floor, specifically to a section of floor plating near the chamber's center, which she was regarding with the calm, evaluative gaze of someone who has found a second interesting thing. "What's the status of your patrol bot?" Sevran said. Thexol blinked. "Docked at my station, standard standby." "Activated." Thexol turned to look at him fully. This was not a normal instruction. The patrol bot was an assessor's monitoring unit, a compact evasive capability drone rated for frontline data combat, assigned to each station for chamber integrity verification in circumstances where a physical check was needed. It was not a trial instrument. It was not a Protocol 9 asset. Activating it mid-session as a chamber integrity check in the absence of a documented safety concern was. "Proctor." "Chamber integrity verification," Sevran said. "Protocol 14, Section 3, we have an unresolved administrative hold and an ungraded cadet on the floor. Document it as a hold state verification procedure." "That protocol applies to." "I am aware of what it applies to, Assessor." Sevran's voice was the same tone it always was. "Activate the bot." This was the moment Thexol would later describe in his private log and nowhere else, as the moment he understood that Sevran was not trying to test Nara Ward. He was trying to see something. He had read the query. He had done the arithmetic. He was a man who had run a ballistics institute for 11 years, who had assessed cadets from 89 species, who had never once needed to reconsider a 7N classification. And he was standing at the assessor station having a thought he did not yet know how to classify. He wanted to see if the thought was correct. Thexol activated the patrol bot. The bot unlocked from its dock with a soft magnetic release, and its rotors came up to speed in 0.8 seconds. It was compact, roughly the width of Thexol's outstretched arm, 8-sided, painted the standard monitoring gray, and it moved with the slightly aggressive confidence of equipment that had been rated for environments considerably more hostile than an assessment chamber. Its navigation system found the chamber's entry hatch in 1.1 seconds and flagged for access. Thexol authorized it. The hatch opened. The bot entered Evaluation Chamber 7. The chamber's threat designation system, which was always live during active sessions, registered the bot as an unscheduled airborne object. It had no session ID. It had no trial classification. It was an anomaly. The system did what it was built to do with anomalies in an active session. It designated the bot as a potential threat object and broadcast the designation to all active monitoring feeds. In the assessor station, Thexol watched this happen on his display. He watched the bot's evasion drive activate, a standard threat response reflex, built in, not commanded, and the bot begin moving on the randomized evasive pattern it used when operating in contested airspace. In the chamber, Nara Ward watched the bot enter. She watched it for 1.4 seconds. Her head tracked it without urgency. Her expression did not change. Then she reached into the canvas pouch. Thexol's secondary eyelids clamped shut. He forced them open. She had the bearing loaded. She was not aiming in the way that the scoring system recognized as aiming, not aligned with a sight, not interfaced with a targeting system, not doing anything the room had been built to measure. She was watching the bot. She was watching the evasion pattern. Her weight had shifted almost imperceptibly to her right foot. She asked through the chamber intercom, very calmly, "Is that one a target?" Thexol's hand was halfway to the intercom button before he registered he was moving. No, that is my assigned monitoring unit. It is not." The elastic band snapped. The sound was small, a sharp, domestic report, the sound of a rubber band releasing, the sound of a child's toy, the sound of something that had no business being in this room. It crossed the chamber in less than a third of a second. The bearing passed clean through the patrol bot's outer stabilizer ring. Not into it, not against it. Through the gap between the ring's mounting brackets, a gap that Thexol had never measured, but that the bot's technical schematic listed as 3.1 centimeters, at a velocity his sensor suite would later record as 94 meters per second, on a trajectory that intersected the stabilizer ring's evasion drive housing and nothing else. The evasion drive died instantly. The main body was untouched. The navigation system was untouched. The data core was untouched. The status light kept blinking. The bot's rotors, suddenly uncompensated by the evasion system, brought it down in a controlled but immediate descent. It landed on the chamber floor upright, slightly off-center, and settled at an angle. 11 degrees. Thexol looked at the angle readout on his station. 11 degrees. He was very still. He was aware, distantly, that his secondary eyelids had not moved since the shot. He was not sure what this meant about his physiological state. He suspected it was not a good sign. In the chamber, Nara Ward lowered the slingshot. She looked at the patrol bot for a moment. The bot's status light blinked amber, on, off, steady and unhurried. She said through the intercom, in the same tone she used for everything, "It's fine, I didn't hit the memory core." Sevran had not moved since the shot. He was standing beside the assessor station with all four eyes on the chamber window, and he looked, Thexol thought, like a man standing in the moment just after his model of something has updated and the update has not yet finished propagating. He said nothing. Thexol looked at the status light, on, off, off. He said nothing either. In the chamber, Nara Ward set the slingshot on the ground beside her, reached into the canvas pouch, and counted her remaining bearings. She did this by feel, without looking, the way a person counts something they have counted many times before. She looked at the intercom panel. "How many do I have left?" she said. Thexol checked the consumption log. He had been tracking it since rung 1, 31. "Okay," she set the pouch back against her hip. "I'll wait." She meant she would wait for the next instruction. There was no performance in it, no announcement, no glance at the observation window. She was not waiting to be admired. She was waiting because she had been told to stand by, and she was still standing by, and she had 31 bearings, and she was simply here. Thexol watched her. Then he looked at the patrol bot. Then he looked at the anomaly log, which had 21 entries. Then he picked up his assessor's stylus, opened a new entry in the manual impact log, not the anomaly feed, the manual log, the one that required a human operator to authorize each record, and typed. Rung 5 unscheduled assessor-initiated protocol 14.3, patrol bot, outer stabilizer ring, evasion drive, 94 ms memory core, intact, navigation, intact, status, amber, blinking 11 degrees starboard tilt, shot classification, deliberate partial disable. Operator's note, the cadet knew exactly what she was taking out and what she was leaving operational. He paused. He added one more line. She aimed for the gap. He submitted the entry and then opened the administrative hold on Nara Ward's result file and changed the note. He deleted pending classification review and replaced it with something he had not written in 11 years of assessor work, because in 11 years he had never needed it. Pending, this result cannot be classified under any existing code. I am escalating to the board directly. He flagged it for board review, not Sevran, the board. His hand was steady. His secondary eyelids were still. He had the odd, clear feeling of a person who has been trying to file something in the wrong folder for the entire afternoon and has just understood where it actually belongs. He sent the flag. He looked at Sevran, who was still at the window. Sevran's 4 eyes were on Nara Ward. She was standing at her mark with 31 bearings and the patience of a person who grew up in a place where waiting was something you did with your whole body, not just your schedule, because in New Sonora, or so the 6-paragraph climate brief had mentioned, the thing you were waiting for was often still alive, and it would know if you moved too early. She aimed for the gap, Thexol said. Sevran did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was the same tone it always was, exact, controlled, but it was the exact, controlled tone of a man exercising the control deliberately. I know, he said. The evasion drive was running a randomized pattern. The gap was approximately 3 centimeters wide. The bot was moving. I know. She watched it for 1.4 seconds. I know, Thexol. The status light blinked, on, off, on, off. I logged it as a deliberate partial disable, Thexol said. I noted the memory core was intact. I noted she announced it without being asked. Sevran turned from the window. He looked at the escalation queue. He looked at Thexol's screen, where the board flag was now showing as submitted and pending review. You escalated to the board directly, he said. Yes, Proctor. Not to me. I escalated to you 4 times. The silence that followed was different from the previous ones. Thexol had become familiar with Sevran's various silences over 11 years, the administrative silence, the assessment silence, the silence that meant he was composing a memo in his head. This one was not any of those. This one was the silence of a Quilathi authority figure standing at the edge of a thing he had filed as closed and discovering it was not. Sevran said, "Get her out of the chamber, give her water, do not tell her the session result, do not tell her about the board flag." He paused, "and get someone up to level 6 to fix that structural resonance issue before it throws off the plating calibration." Thexol switched the chamber intercom on. "Cadet Ward, you can come out now." A pause, then her voice entirely unbothered. "Okay." He watched her pick up the canvas pouch, settle it at her hip, and walk toward the exit hatch. She did not look at the patrol bot as she passed it. She had already moved on from it, in the complete and total way of someone for whom a thing is finished when it is finished. The status light blinked. On, off, on, off. Thexol watched it for a moment. Then he went back to his station and opened the Earth environmental query, the one that had taken 4 seconds, and returned a result he had closed without reading, the one he had read properly only when Sevran was beside him. He read it again, alone this time without an audience. He read it 3 more times. Then he opened the intake note he had filed that morning, the one that read, bilateral symmetry standard, muscle density reading, borderline insufficient, grip strength, below the 40th percentile for species with analogous limb structure, flag for monitoring, and he sat with it. The board flag was pending. The result was unclassified. The anomaly log had 21 entries and a manual impact log had 1. His patrol bot was sitting at an 11-degree tilt in an empty chamber with its status light blinking amber in the dark. He thought about the intake note. He thought about 40 minutes ago when it had seemed like an accurate record. He thought about the gap, 3 centimeters, moving target, 1.4 seconds of observation, 31 bearings left in the pouch, and she had used exactly 1. He thought grip strength below the 40th percentile. He opened an amendment file on the intake note and sat with the cursor blinking for a long time. He did not yet have the language for it. He would need to find it before the board met. He would need to find language for all of it, the anomaly log, the manual impact entry, the Earth query, the gap, and assemble it into a report that explained, in professional terminology, what he had spent the last 2 hours watching. He had 11 years of assessor experience. He had processed 47 species in a single morning. He had written intake notes for cadets from 89 different origin profiles. He had never once needed the amendment file before. He left it open and went to get water for Nara Ward. The board convened at 700. Thexol had not slept. He carried his assessor's report and his manual impact log and his 21-entry anomaly feed into the boardroom with the quiet care of someone transporting something the building did not yet have a category for. Administrator Yelnura sat at the head of the table, Registrar Foss to her left, external assessor Meave Than from the Quilasi Sphere's central accreditation body, brought in because Thexol's flag had landed in the category requiring outside review, sat to her right and had already read everything. He could tell because she was not reading anything now. Sevran sat at the center, four-chambered eyes in the slow rotation pattern that meant he was thinking. He had not spoken since entering. Thexol presented the session record in order. He read from the anomaly log. He described each rung. He read the manual impact entry. He noted the 3.1 centimeter gap, the evasion pattern, the 1.4 seconds of observation, the intact memory core, the unprompted announcement. He read Sevran's original 7N classification, aloud into the record. Then Registrar Foss said, "I'm pulling the transfer file." The Inter-Academy transfer system had one field for origin planet environmental classification. One entry, one code, populated at the originating institution, passed forward, never re-verified. It had always been accurate before. Foss read the code, Class 4, Garden World, Benign Biosphere, Low Ambient Hazard. "This is 14 months out of date," she said. Meave Than said, "Earth's global environmental status was updated 14 months ago. The current classification is Class 9, Persistent Hazard Environment." The room was quiet. Thexol watched Sevran do the arithmetic. It was not a long calculation. It started with Class 9 and moved through the anomaly log, the crosswind spin shot, the gap, the 1.4 seconds, and ended in a place the 7N classification had not been designed to reach. The entire trial reorganized itself into a single coherent picture. Sevran's 4 eyes went still. Meave Than continued, without emphasis. Class 9 cadets showed documented elevation in implicit kinesthetic compensation, environmental adaptive threat pattern recognition, and field-acquired motor calibration. These traits are not measured by standard intake assessment. She paused. They are also not listed in the Class 4 briefing packet. Because the briefing packet said Class 4, Yelnura said. "Yes." Thexol read the supplementary note into the record, the one he had found at 300 in the new Sonora environmental brief. Field acquisition training in low fabricator, high desert regions, 8,000 to 14,000 lifetime practice hours, median approximately 11,000. Primary domains, projectile accuracy, range estimation, wind drift compensation. When he finished, Yelnura wrote something down. Sevran said, quietly, "She had 11,000 hours before she walked into my intake bay." "Approximately," Thexol said. The researcher noted the methodology doesn't capture practice begun before age 8. Nobody said anything. The decisions came in order. The 7N classification on NARA Ward's equipment file was voided retroactively. In its place, Code 7C, revised, Kinetic Propulsion Device, Manually Operated Projectile Class. The anomaly log's 21 entries were reclassified as registered kinetic impacts. The patrolbot impact was logged as Rung 5, Assessor-Authorized, Deliberate Partial Disable. The technical certification noting the 3.1 centimeter bracket gap, 94 meters per second, and the absence of collateral damage. Then Registrar Foss opened the unassisted targeting database. 340 years of entries, 89 species. She typed the new entry, Ward Nara, Earth Class 9 Persistent Hazard Environment, Weapon, Elastic Polymer and Wood Frame Ferrous Sphere Projectiles, Assistance, None, Rungs 5-5, Impacts 22-22, Misses 0. She submitted it. It propagated through the database in the automatic way of all significant things, quiet, procedural, unannounced. The field that had been blank for 340 years now had one name in it. Sevran read the protocol revisions himself. He had drafted them overnight. The first revised intake form field 7C to include projectile materials regardless of container type or decorative elements. The second added a mandatory manual impact logging channel to all evaluation chambers. The third was a single line added above the existing Protocol 9 briefing text. Evaluation Protocol 9 measures what it was designed to measure. It is not a description of everything that exists. The board approved all three without discussion. Sevran did not apologize. He was Quilathi. What he had done instead was stay awake, writing protocol language, and read it aloud to a boardroom in a voice that was exactly the same as it always was, which was the only form this kind of reckoning took for him. Nara Ward arrived at the administrative office at 1000. Registrar Foss sent Thexol a message at 10:23. Done, she signed. Then she asked for the old form back. He read it twice. The old form, educational prop, non-scoring, personal effects, grip strength below the 40th percentile. She had signed the corrected one and asked for the discarded version. He did not know if it was sentiment or evidence or something else entirely. He thought all of those were probably true at the same time and that she would not explain it to anyone who asked. He sent Foss a message, give it to her. He had a feeling Foss already had. The amendment to the intake note took another hour. Mevthan had the language, he wrote while she corrected. When they were done, the note included the phrase environmental adaptive musculature profile and the phrase field acquisition motor training not captured by standard grip force metric and a flag for intake assessment revision. It was accurate. It was also almost entirely useless as a description of the person it described. He filed it. Then he opened his personal log, the private one, 11 years of observations that did not fit the form fields, and wrote entry 848. She knew about the patrol bot before I activated it. The dock is visible from the east wall through the observation window frame. She would have seen it during intake. I think she had already categorized it. I think she had already categorized most of what was in this building before the first rung started. I have not included this in any official report. I don't have a category for it. The intake note says she was flagged for monitoring. She was, just not for the reason I wrote down. He closed the log. The official report went in at 1847. Under intake code 7C revised, the canvas pouch was entered as kinetic ordnance container, embroidered canvas, decorative motif, solar yellow, contents, ferrous spheres 40 units, 1.1 cm diameter, 5.6 grams each. Danger rating, situationally significant, do not log as personal effects. The closing note read, the scoring system was not designed for this weapon. The trial was not designed for this cadet. Both statements were true and neither was sufficient. He submitted it, turned off his station, put on his coat. He paused at the door and crossed back to the desk and straightened the patrol bot, not upright, just cleaner. Still 11 degrees, still blinking amber. He left. In the dormitory hallway, Nara Ward was walking back from the common room with the canvas pouch at her hip and the old intake form folded in her jacket pocket. She was thinking about the Eastern Practice Range. The building schematic showed the heat exchange stack running along the exterior wall at approximately target height, which meant the morning thermals would push left to right across the range face. The same direction as Chamber 7's crosswind injectors. She had not been assigned a practice slot yet. She was going to ask about it tomorrow.